Okay, I think we'll go ahead and start because I have lots to share. So it's nice to see everybody. My presentation this afternoon is all about student voice and letting them be heard. And I'm going to tell you some stories about my school and how I did that over the last 8 years with kids that I really care about. And so hopefully it will inspire you too to really listen to your kids. My name is Shannon McClintock Miller. I was the district teacher librarian in Van Meter, Iowa. I left this summer to do consulting and presenting and writing full time. And so I've been having a lot of fun, but I really miss the kids. And so today when I was going through this, I got a little emotional. So I hope I can hold it all together because I miss them a lot. But our story at Van Meter, it's not just my story, it's a story about what we did at Van Meter and my school. And we really transformed education. And a lot of it was, like I just said, listening to the kids and giving them a chance to be heard through different things that we did. This is our school. It's a school of about 600 kids, K-12. There's a lot going on, though, in this little rural school. A lot of technology, a lot of thinking differently, a lot of innovation, and just lots of great administrators, teachers, and kids, and parents, too. And I was really empowered to do great things, to try new things, and to have a voice, and especially to follow my passion, which really led me to let the kids also follow their passion and give them that. And we had a very, I was a librarian, and so we did a lot of reading, a lot of traditional things, but we also did a lot of things that were outside of the box, like Skyping and connecting with the world and bringing in opportunities for our kids to really be heard. And so it was just a constant place in the library and within the school to make these things happen. These were the pictures that made me think. So while you're watching this today and listening, I want you to think about your learning. And how do you feel when you are asked how you want to learn and what you think is important? Think about that. And what would happen if we asked our students what is important to you? Have you guys asked your kids that this year? Think about that. So I have done a lot of thinking the last 8 years and a lot of talking to kids. And this is my friend Meriden. And when I heard Meriden's story, when I really asked her, Meriden was in 4th grade. And I was getting ready for a conference with some other kids that I am friends with from another district called the Iowa Student Learning Institute. I love this because the byline is "It's not your grandma's conference." And it was all ran by kids, about 400 kids the first year that we had it, and it was awesome. And these two boys, Jack and Ian, they put on the conference, and they were my friends from a neighboring district, and they were just awesome and so inspiring. And I invited all the kids to come from my high school and junior high, and of course Meriden, the 4th grader, is the one who came. And Meriden always wanted to be involved in everything we did. So her and her mom, Lisa, came, and Meriden enjoyed the conference. She did some tweets, and she took pictures, and she listened to what they were saying in the beginning. But, she's a 4th grader, so I could tell that she was a little bit bored with all of the talk. She was probably the only elementary child there. And she asked some questions, which were good to get herself engaged too. But afterwards, what happened was what really struck with me. And the moms, there was 2 girls that I had there. One of them was from a different school. It was my friend Jen's daughter, Jackie, and also Meriden and her mom. And so the moms and I were talking, and I looked over and I said, "Look at what is happening." And they were like on their iPads, on their devices, and I went around back, and what I saw was what really made a difference. I saw that Meriden, the 4th grader, was helping her new friend, who she had never met before, Jackie, start a blog about her gaming passion. And I could hear her talking, it sounded like me talking to the kids at school. And I could hear her instructing her on how to make a blogger and how to tweet and how to get connected. And she was showing all the kids. And Jackie, my friend's daughter, she's a very quiet girl, loves gaming, loves to play Minecraft, loves to play on her PS3. And she just doesn't really fit in school. And so this was an opportunity for her to make a difference, and that's what happened. And so during that time, within probably 5 minutes, they had a new blog made that Jackie was going to write on. And that is what stuck with me through this whole day and this whole event, was what I saw with these 2 girls. And afterwards, Jen texted me, and this is Jackie's mom. She texted me the next day. And she said, "Thank you so much for inviting us. I feel like knowing you will change my life and Jackie's too." And that's because I listened. And she also had somebody else that listened. A little girl that was in 4th grade who had never met her, listened to her and helped her with something she was passionate about. And Meriden's mom, I thought this was so perfect. She told me that day that she was with her people. And she felt like she had something that she could contribute because somebody listened to her. And so we all want that, I think, for our kids. So after experiencing this, I knew that I had to tell the story of how we make a difference and transform education at Van Meter and how we let our kids be heard. And so I was asked to do a K-12, it was like an online conference, and they wanted me to be the opening keynote and talk about student voice. So I asked Meriden if she would come, and I said, "I really want you to tell your story," and I was telling her everything, and Meriden looked at me and she said, "Why are you telling me what I should say? Why don't you ask me what I think we should say?" And I'm like, that makes sense, like I should. And so we decided to make a Google form, and we sent it out on Twitter and sent it out to everybody that we knew. And we had responses from kids all over the world who responded for what they wanted. What do they want their voice to say? How do they want to be heard? And it was amazing, the responses that we got. And so we looked through those, and those kind of became our main themes for what we were going to talk about. But it really also drove the way that I did a lot of things. And I got a lot of these things, and I taught this way for a long time. But when I really heard these answers, I started putting it all together. And we heard this. We heard, let us be connected. Let us have experiences. Let us create. Let us teach. Let us collaborate. Let us have choices. Let us have access. Let us create our space. Let us make a difference. And most of all, let us have a voice. And so I'm going to tell you some stories about all these different themes and end with my favorite one of the student voice. But when I heard that they wanted to be connected, these are some of the things that happened at our school that really made a difference. I spent a lot of time, as a lot of teachers did, just on relationships. I think that's the key to all of this. If we don't have relationships with our kids, none of this is going to happen. And so taking the time to listen and to make connections and to connect with the kids and their passions is really where it all starts. And then we connected with others on Skype. We connected with authors and illustrators. This is a picture of the kids, and they're Skyping with Tom Engelberger, who wrote Origami Yoda. And they're making origamis with him, and they're having a book study and just a really great time with him. And we did that. He became a friend of the kids. This is a picture of the kids, and I'd kept Twitter up in the library all the time. And it just became an extension of what was happening in the libraries and in the classrooms. And if they had a question, like we're doing iMovie this day, and it was a new version, and I didn't know how to fix it, and so we just kept it up so the kids could ask questions. So they were connecting with others all over the world. And this story, this is a class that I taught a few years ago with my friend Bill Brannick in Philly. And I had half the kids at Van Meter, and Bill had half in Philly, and we taught every day a social media and technology class. And so all these kids have a different student on their computer, and they're Skyping with them and working on a project. And so they were connected. It was so simple. And my daughter was in the class at the time, and I would find her like on her bed Skyping with her friend Rianne in Philly. And it was just so great. And we actually saw Rianne. She had an internship in Disney, and we saw her in March. And so to still make those connections for me too is pretty powerful. This is a picture of me when I visited the kids in Philly. We also did a lot of connecting with digital tools and companies, publishers. And the key with this was they taught me too. And so if there was a new tool or a new technology and I didn't know how to use it, I didn't have to be the only teacher anymore. I could connect with anybody. I just reached out on Twitter, and I asked them to come to the library and to teach our kids and myself and the teachers. And we did this all the time. And it was really great. Also, the social media, not just Twitter, but Facebook. I connected with the kids and the families in our community and others around the world on Facebook. And it was so simple to put up, a couple things a day. And I had our Facebook and our Twitter on the library computer. And so the kids also had the opportunity to post things and to tweet things. And it became just an extension of what we were doing. how we were connecting. And then last year, this was a big aha for me, and I was so happy when the kids mentioned it, but I always had an Instagram. And one day, one of the girls said, why don't we start one for the library? We can just put it on the iPad. I'm like, that's a great idea. And so we started an Instagram, and we put it on the iPad in the library so they had access to it all the time. And they could just come pick it up and take a picture and post it right on Instagram. And that was an instant connection for parents and people that followed us all through the day. And it was so simple, but it really made a difference for the kids. And that's where they are at too. And so a lot of our kids loved seeing themselves on there also. Let us collaborate. And all of those stories, of course, are collaboration too, but we had a lot of collaboration going on in other ways. And just things like we had a lot of technology. And so things like when they were using ebooks and databases, and they were connecting when they were making projects, but also with their different devices. We were a one-to-one iPad school in 4th and 5th grade for the last 3 years. And so they had a lot of access also to iPads and to digital resources too, which really changed the way that they collaborated. You can see that our library wasn't very organized and neat all the time. And this is them, they're collaborating with a boy, a 5th grader that is in New Hampshire. And we did a lot of collaborating with other kids the same way we did with like people that maybe had a digital tool or a publisher. We used them as teachers. And so this boy is teaching our kids about GeoGuessr. And this is the picture in Van Meter, and here they are in New Hampshire kind of at the same time. But talk about empowering kids. You know, it's just so fun. And they'd rather learn from other kids anyway. This is a picture of kind of a full project, and we did a lot of collaborating when, you know, sometimes it was just really on the fly, and it was maybe a 10-minute connection. But this is a project that we did, and we did a blogging project with our 3rd graders, and we started out by connecting with another class in Georgia, and then we connected with an author. We did paper blogging where we sent them back and forth in the mail, and then finally we did blogs together where they were writing with them virtually. And we did this all through the year with these kids, but because we did it together and we started out and really hooked them with the author and Skyping with each other, it was just so successful, and we saw great things from their blogs. This is a picture of our high school kids, and they're Skyping with the author of Rotten Ruin. And the kids liked to challenge me when it came to finding people to connect them, with authors. And they would say, oh, I bet you can't connect with Jonathan Mayberry that wrote Rotten Ruin. And I was always like, don't ever be afraid to ask people to collaborate, or to ask them if they're on Twitter and Facebook, they're there too to connect with us. And so this is just one example of how easy it really is to collaborate with anyone. And Jonathan, not only a great author, but he's also a teacher, and he taught our creative writing class for half of a semester with the teacher at Van Meter. So really great. Let us create. And this was one of my favorite parts because I loved it when they were creating the library. And this is a great picture because this little girl, they were doing Dots for Dot Day, and she wanted to put it on Instagram. So she grabbed the iPad and she's taking a picture to post on Instagram. And she's a 2nd grader. And so that was pretty fun to see them have ownership too of their creating. And it wasn't just things with technology either. You know, you saw the art, and this was one of our seniors last year, and I wanted to build a little free library for the town. And so Colton brought in an old TV, and he made it into the little free library for the town. So it wasn't always about the technology. It was about anything that they wanted to create. This is my son Hagen, and Hagen, he did a project with Little Bighorn. And then his little friends, these were the little group of kids, teachers' kids after school, and they were always on Minecraft. And that was something that our school really didn't want them to have access to until they saw this. And Hagen, without anybody even asking him, built his whole model in Minecraft after school. And so I was able to go then and say, it really does have some place in our school, and it's a great place for them to connect. But I let him do that. And I think we need to let them have those tools that they need. This is a story of a little boy named Aaron, and Aaron loved the I Spy books, and he wanted to create his own. He wanted to connect with the author. And so I reached out to Jean, and I asked her, and she said, I'd love to connect with you guys, but you have to make your own book first. And so Aaron helped me because that was his passion, helped me with his class. The and they brought all their own materials and took pictures, and they wrote their own text, and they made their own iBook when they Skyped, or ebook, and they Skyped with Jean, which was just a really great experience, not just for Aaron, but for all of the kids to have. Our kids also, K-12, had portfolios. And when we started with this portfolio, it was like a really overwhelming project, because all the kids were going to have Google sites. We never thought that they would take such ownership over them, though, and they wrote on them all the time. And so to see them creating these great places where they could share everything and have a voice was really important for them. Our high school kids, too, sometimes, it's so simple. We think of things like having a news channel or maybe having a different club and what it means to kids. But these kids, they started, it's called the VM Above Ground, and it's our news channel. And it was really simple, videotaped every Friday and put it on a YouTube channel. But it made a big difference for this group of kids and also just a voice from our community. Let us have experiences. And as you can see, our kids have a lot of experiences, and I could go on, but these are some that really stick out for me. A couple years ago, some of my friends in New Jersey and Canada, we decided to start a poetry summit online, a virtual poetry summit. And we thought we would just open up Google Hangout like all day, and the kids could share poetry, and we would invite poets and musicians, and never knew that it would have such an impact. But it turned out to be this wonderful event. And it was so simple. We kept Google Hangout open, invited people in, sent out a Google Doc for others to connect, and we're getting ready now for the 3rd year. So if you guys are interested, check out the hashtag Poetry Summit, because we're looking for people to connect now too. But it was something that the kids really loved it. They wanted to have a virtual poetry slam, and it turned into something that was really special for a lot of us. Also, the kids, they wanted to have a photography club. And being in a small school, our art is pretty limited. And so I started a photography club with them in the library, but it soon turned into a virtual photography club where we were connecting with other kids and having these great experiences with photographers and different people that were in film, and we would meet during advisory. And once again, it was so simple, but yet it really meant a lot to the kids who wanted to do photography. And the Somewhat Virtual Book Club is something that we have been doing now for probably the last 5 years. And for those of you who are librarians or any kind of teacher with older kids, this is something that you should check out. And we have a hashtag that's up there. But my friend Joyce Valenza and I, we were talking, and I was talking one day with her. We were at a conference, and I said, my book club, it's 3 boys and myself. And we sit in my office, and it's a picture up in the corner. And I loved them, and it was fun, but I was like, they have to be bored, like with me and talking, and we had troubles like deciding, what we were going to read. And so it started with just Joyce and Philly and me in Iowa connecting our kids, and soon people started hearing about it, and we had connections in California and Texas and all over the United States coming together in a Skype once a month and having this great conversation and experience about books. And so check that out too, because that was really fun. And you can do that with any grade level, really. And we did a lot of just experiences that they had every day that were just really simple. This is the kids in their Skyping with Sharon Creech, and they got done doing an author study. And so we had Sharon come in for an hour and talk to the kids and lead the classroom, because it's great having us lead it, but when you can have an author lead kind of a culminating activity for a book study, it's pretty special to the kids. We also created graphic novels last year, and it was kind of the same thing. That I have an art degree and a passion for art, but when we started this, I really don't have any experience, drawing graphic novels. So I reached out and found a person that was an author, and also found an artist that drew graphic novels, and they taught the kids, and they made them with the kids for about 6 weeks, and they created these beautiful graphic novels, but it was really fun for them. And just like when we started coding, I had no clue anything about coding like a year and a half ago. And my superintendent said, your job now is going to be to teach coding to all the kids in kindergarten through 12th grade. And so I just started reaching out on Twitter to people that were creating games and creating sites for kids. And I had them come in and have a great experience with our kids and teach them coding, and me too. And now I do know something about it because of everybody that taught us. But let us teach. And this is one that I love seeing all the kids. And being a K-12 librarian, it was fun for me to see how they could really interact. And I used actually my elementary kids a lot more even than my high school kids to teach others in our building. And kind of my way of flipping the library, because I didn't really have a lot of time to create my own videos, is I would have the kids make videos and I would have them send them out, or them take them to that teacher who needed help, like right here with Haiku Deck. And I know that the kids are good, and I'd grab them and have them do a little video, and then we use that to teach others. And the same with this one, when we did Tux Paint. Tux Paint was something that some of the kids and parents had a little trouble with. And so this was a video made by first graders. And then I just had that they could share. So let them do that teaching of tools, that might be kind of tricky. Also, our kids did a lot of teaching with others around the world. And these are kids, and they're Skyping in with Joyce's kids in Philly. And they were high school kids, and they're teaching them about using GeoGuessr. But it was so fun because they just were so proud of themselves and loved that. Also teaching parents. This was a big thing, teaching parents and teachers, like after school or at back to school night, and having them be the ones that are in charge of that. And this is Meriden, actually, and it was on parent-teacher conference night, and she taught them all kinds of things. I think she's showing them around Mackin right now, the ebooks or something. And this is a letter from Meriden's mom. And ISTE interviewed Meriden a few years ago, and they featured her as the student. And I love this because Meriden's mom made some points that I never really thought about, even though I'm a parent. But these kids, they're learning all of these new things from us, especially now with all the technology and social media and things that they're using, that they're going to go home and they're going to teach their parents too. And so we need to remember that, to give our kids that voice that they're going to have at home too, to include their parents and to make sure that they have those skills that they need as well. Let us have access. Our kids had lots of access at Van Meter, and this is something that did not happen overnight. This is a story of 8 years, and they had a lot of access to laptops and to devices, and they could bring their own device, and they had access to ebooks and to great databases. They had access to almost everything was open at our school. And so it was, they had a lot of access, and we gave them a lot of responsibility too, that we trusted them. And we had ebooks in Mac and VIA, and we used different databases that made a difference in their learning and really, really engaged the kids. Oh, we wondered if that was going to happen. And also, we decided a couple years ago to give our kids access to Google Drive. And so all of our kids K-12 had their own Google Drive. And this made a huge difference because we were then able to put everything in their Google Drive and not worry about where it was stored on the server or which computer. And the kids, what we saw is they were creating a lot more at home too, because they had access to that. And also giving them access to others on an individual basis. Like if one of the students, if they needed to Skype with somebody, or maybe they needed to connect with another or another teacher or professional across the world, to give them that access and those opportunities. And this is a girl, and she started writing a book probably about 4 years ago, just in a Google Doc. And she's now written like 3 500-page novels. But I helped her connect with publishers in New York and different authors that became her mentors. And so she had access at her lunchtime and at home too to these. Giving them access to new tools, I think, is also important. And this is an iPad stand, and I never thought, when I got this for doing a project for TechSmith, and they gave me this iPad holder on a tripod, so I put my iPad in there. Never thought that it would make that big of a difference in the library. It made a huge difference for all of our kids K-12. It was crazy, and they would find all kinds of fun projects to do with it. But by giving them access to that simple tool, it was really fun. And giving them access to their own devices. This is a picture of they were downloading, we called it Put the Library in Your Pocket at the beginning of the year. And they downloaded different apps and different things onto their own device. But giving them access to that device, it made a big difference for them at school and at home because they had all those resources in their hand all the time. And this is just Remind 101. And when we started using Remind 101 on their own devices, it was another way for us to really connect. And so we gave them access to different apps like that and tools. let us create our space. And this is one that I was really passionate about the last few years, and they're renovating Van Meter, and so I had a big say kind of in the library and different things that we were doing, and our library was really small. This was where the little ones are, was an elementary space, and there was an office and a high school space. And the kids, it was never really clean. It was always messy, kind of in disarray, but it worked for us. It was loud and messy and fun. And it was also out in the hallways and online. Our library was really everywhere that we placed it. And last year I started thinking about the renovation and how long it would take. And I actually went to Disney for spring break, and I saw all these signs all over, because when Disney built things, he always put up like these dream builder signs. Have you guys seen them? I love them. And if you've never seen them, you have to Google that and look up what he did. And they're always so positive. And I went back and I looked at, this is my associate Diana, who's been at Van Meter for 20 years. And I said, I really think that we need to be positive about all the changes, and we need to get rid of the library office and move in a makerspace. And I thought, she's either going to hate me or cry or, something. And she was so excited to make that change. And so we got rid of everything in that office. And I started talking to the kids, and they started making plans, and the kids totally renovated that little office space. And they Skyped with places like MakerBot and Little Bits, and they did all of the budget that we needed. And we made this tiny space, thanks to the shop teacher and the kids and all the work that they did, into this wonderful maker space that all the kids could go into. And we also made a digital maker space and just put digital tools that were mainly free and ebooks and things like that, so the kids could use that at all time too. And so, help them realize that they can design that space. Let that space be theirs, no matter if it's a library or a classroom. Let us have choices. This is something that we did a pretty good job of. We let our kids have a lot of choices on what they were doing. And as you can see, once again, just a lot of fun in the library and in the classrooms. And one of my favorite stories about choices that the kids wanted to make is we had a lot of computers and a lot of technology, and sometimes we didn't have enough people to help with all of this that needed to be fixed. And so the kids in the elementary, they thought that they would start a club called the Technical Difficulty Library Club. And they became the ones that not only talked about technology and help people, but they also made that choice to really be those advocates for more and more technology too. And so it was really fun to see, when kids have a choice, what they can do. Let us make a difference. This was one that struck home to me with this story. And last year, my son, Hagen, he's in 4th grade now. He was in 3rd grade. And Hagen came home and he said, Mrs. Volk is going to ban rainbow balloon bracelets from the classroom. I was like, oh, heck no. We have to change that. And so I brainstormed with the kids, how could we do this? And I said, how about we do a research project? And we make it relevant to what we're doing in the library, and we can research and learn about citations and create a great project. And so we started researching, and the kids called the project Banding Together. And we started doing all this research and getting into groups, and we Skyped in with EasyBib, and we followed the research process. And it was amazing what just that brought when they had that voice, when Hagen told me, and then I gave that back to them and said, let's make a difference and have these seen as a good thing, what those kids did. And it was just amazing to see what they created, and just so much fun too. And I'm going to tell you in a little bit what happened after they started doing this, but we soon started blogging about it and writing about it, and they did a great job collecting things from all over the community. And it was amazing. So I can't wait to tell you what happened. And this is something that kind of really resonates with me. And the lesson here is that our students love to get involved in the causes that move them. And it's our responsibility as educators to offer guidance, but let the students lead the way. And that's a perfect example of that, is I listened to him, but I really kind of tried to guide it and connect it to the curriculum and what they were learning, but I let them lead the way. And the last one I want to talk about is letting them have a voice. This is one that is probably the most important to me, and what I miss the most probably about teaching. And these are 3 voices from Van Meter. And the first one you're going to hear about is Gunnar. And Gunnar is a kindergartner. He's a 1st grader now. And Gunnar was a little one who he really wouldn't talk to me very much. And he was always very serious, always had his arms crossed, and very, very serious about everything he did. And we were getting ready to do the Iowa Animal Research Project. And we kicked it off by Skyping with my friend Seymour Simon. And Seymour was going to talk to the kids, each one of them, about their driving question. And so on this day, Gunnar got up, and it was his time to talk to Seymour, and his teacher had given him a snake for his animal. And Gunnar did not want to do a snake. And so Seymour said, well, what do you want to do? And he said, I want to do the woolly mammoth. And so we both said, well, Seymour and I, let him do it then. Well, it's not an Iowa animal. Who cares? And Gunnar said, I promise I will prove that the woolly mammoth walked across Iowa. And so a few weeks later, this is Gunnar when he was talking to Seymour. It was so sweet, but he was not happy. A few weeks later, Gunnar, we had this project parade, and we invited all the parents to show off their PBL projects. And Gunnar proved that the woolly mammoth did not walk across Iowa, but what it did was it engaged him, and Gunnar did talk to me. Every time he saw me, he told me what the woolly mammoth did and what the T-Rex did and what he learned with Seymour and what he learned through the project. And so we hooked him, and that was huge, and we let his voice be heard. And this is the story that I just told you about Hagen, about my little boy. And after that project got started, the cool thing that happened is people started reading about it on my blog. And this publishing company in New York, they called me and they said, we want to help you, and we want to do something with all the bracelets. And these kids were bringing in hundreds of bracelets just from Van Meter alone. And so we Skyped with them, and we started brainstorming how we could come together. And we ended up joining forces, and we have a foundation called Banding Together now, just from that project. And I just got off the phone this morning with another organization that's going to take over because I can't keep up with all the bracelets coming in, because we've gotten millions and millions of bracelets from all over the world. And we have sent them we just sent a great big batch to India, and we just got back probably 100 letters from an orphanage in India of these kids and how thankful they are. Just because our kids did a research project and they started talking about it, and they encouraged others to send bracelets to and to create. And so it's just so neat to see what can happen. And check that out too. It's a cool project, and it's just under Banding Together on Facebook, or also we have a hashtag called Banding Together. But let me know if you want to participate, because we're definitely still taking bracelets. But it was all because we let Hagen have a voice. And the last story is about Luke. And Luke is one of my favorite students that I've ever had. And Luke was one who, he's autistic, and he would see me in the hallway, and it was like I was on Glee. He would sing to me at the top of his lungs, never talk to me. I was the library girl, and my principal superintendent was the bald guy, and Luke would just sing. He didn't know what he was going to say to me. And last year I wrote a grant to MakerBot for a 3D printer. And I just wrote it on a whim one night because I thought it'd be cool to have in the library. And Luke caught wind of it, and the next day he found me in the hallway, and it was like he was an expert on 3D printing. And he came up to me and he said, Shannon, I hear you're getting a 3D printer. And I was just floored, because he was telling me all about the model I got, all about what we were going to do, and he was no longer singing to anybody. And the superintendent was no longer the bald guy, he was Darren. And yeah, he called us by our first names, but at least he was calling us by our names. And he was so proud that we were going to get that in our school. And so I told the office when the MakerBot came, to make sure that Luke was the one that came and got it. And so that's a picture of the day that we got it, and he comes storming in with it on the cart. And I had kindergartners on the floor in another part of the library, and he was so excited to open that thing up. And I just let him. And within minutes, he had gathered high school kids and elementary kids, and they were printing things. And I had never even seen a 3D printer before. And he became the expert. And he was Skyping with MakerBot, and he was Skyping with other companies, and he was tweeting things, and he started a YouTube channel, all because we got this 3D printer and Luke had a voice. So that's a pretty powerful story. So I want you to ask yourself this. What would happen if you listened to your students, if you asked them how they want to learn? And think about your learning. How do you feel when you're asked how you want to learn and what you think is important. Our children's voices have the power to make a difference. They have a power to change education. They have the power to change the world, and you have the power to be that change. So I encourage you to go back and really listen to your kids and ask them. Ask them what you want to hear, their little voices, and you want to hear what they're passionate about, because it truly does make a difference. So thank you very much for having me, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Thanks.